Welcome to the Craftsman Online podcast. This is a weekly program focused on the relevant topics in Freemasonry and the various aspects of the craft. Any opinions, thoughts, or viewpoints shared during this program are that of the individual and do not reflect the official position of any Grand Lodge, appendant, or concordant body from which that member may hail. I'm your host, Brother Michael Arce, co-founder of CraftsmanOnline.com. Excited to welcome him back, not only as a friend to the podcast, but also a friend of Craftsman Online. Very worshipful Michael LaRocco. Welcome back, Brother Michael.
Thank you, Brother Arce. Very good to see you again.
One of my favorite guys to get into deep esoteric or deeper meaning conversations with, and we'll be getting into that as we're excited to announce the return of our reading room, which are private invitation-only meetings that focus on Masonic lessons, literature, and ritual. But first, a little bit about Michael LaRocco's background. He is the current AGL for the Nassau District and past master of Lynbrook Massapequa Lodge, number 822. Those Long Island lodges always get me. Also a dual member of the York and Scottish Rite. So we're excited to have him back because he's taking over the reins along with worshipful brother Bill Edwards, who's not able to join the podcast tonight, but they're going to be the co-hosts of our reading room, which is relaunching on Thursday, September 29th. And by the time you listen to this podcast, an invitation has been sent to you if you've signed up through our email at craftsmanonline.com. This is open to all Master Masons who are in good standing and have registered through our website at craftsmanonline.com. Michael, let's start out with this easy question here. You were a past panelist on our reading rooms earlier this year, and now will be taking over as one of the co-hosts. What excited you to come back and take the lead on this?
Our Deputy Grand Master, who's persuasive, sees the right people for the right job, and he persisted. And then Right Worshipful Bill Edwards called me up and said, "Hey, Mike, we're doing this anyway. We give each other material to read, and we discuss it in depth, like sometimes 2-3 times a week. We're doing the work anyway. Why not just repurpose it and really kind of put it out there for the rest of the state, the Grand Lodge, New York?"
Let's talk about the format of the reading room and what makes it special. We've discussed on previous podcast episodes the idea of Masonic book clubs. Some lodges still do this, where they will have a selection either from a book or a part of our ritual that they read openly in lodge and then have a discussion on it. Some districts actually have reading groups or reading rooms where they get together outside of their normal lodge meetings. How does your home lodge handle this type of Masonic education?
We never entered into the formal reading room where we put one thing out there, but we started to have deeper discussions before and after the meetings. And then actually when I became master, I started using it as a teaching tool and a learning tool. And we started talking about this during lodge. And so there'll be various topics that come up. People will ask different questions. You'll be working on different things. And, my lodge used to be where we used to, meet before lodge and maybe meditate together and do some work together. And it seemed to be like all of a sudden, this like fire was set in our lodge and some of the lodges in the district. And some of us are now on fire. We see the deeper meaning of the degrees. And when you see the deeper meaning of our symbolic degrees, it makes it more magnetic where you really want to work at it. And it really makes you feel good about doing maybe the stuff that's not so esoteric. There's a meaning behind it.
And I think searching for that light as Master Masons, it's one of the things that we're told, like, it's open to you. This is your job. You're supposed to go do it. Some of us go pursue that light by getting more involved, either with the ritual in our Blue Lodge, or we go seek that light in the concordant or the appendant bodies that are available in Freemasonry. And others just do it the old-fashioned way. We open up a book and we stumble upon things. In my home jurisdiction, I can say we have never had a reading room before, so I thought this concept was pretty special. Most of our reading stories wouldn't even really happen in lodge. I can't even think of a meeting where I would be in where a brother would stand up and say, "Hey, I read this book," and start talking about it. If we didn't have a speaker that was giving a program on a particular selection or something that they had read, normally it would just be kind of a handful of guys that would get together either at a certain section in the bar or a different room, or even in the parking lot outside, and just start talking about things very organically. And that's how these discussions came about in my home lodge. And I always look forward to them. I always look forward to hearing the guys that would tackle the heavy hitters like the Manly P. Halls, the Albert Pikes. Was there an author or a group of authors that inspired you as you were searching for your light?
Wilhelm Hurst was definitely the initiatory experience for me. when I started reading The Meaning of Masonry, which you could literally find the website where you could read it online for free. The book is inexpensive. Actually, when I was master, I gave out the book to all my officers as a gift. And so that really, it's not so easy to read. It's terse. And there's actually a section for the Holy Royal Arch I would not read if I wasn't a member of the Holy Royal Arch, just because you wouldn't understand it. So I found that really kind of like opened me up to seeing what this is really all about, at least for me. And then the other one I would say is McNulty's, another really big one. I like Pike and the Greats, and they're really good too. I have to say that I like a lot more the Wilmhursts and the McNulty's.
I've been able to tackle a couple of Pike's books. They're like the little thin pamphlets. I've never gotten into Morals and Dogma. As far as Manly P. Hall, Secret Teachings of All Eight, nope, I don't even... there was a companion book that came out, and I read a couple chapters so that I had a resource material for a presentation I was giving in Lodge. But I found even his The Lost Keys of Freemasonry, that was pretty good. And I liked Ancient Egyptians in Freemasonry. That was a pretty interesting and compelling book towards the end. But like you, Kirk McNulty, I find his book, Working the Way of the Craftsman, to be one of the most influential. I reach back to it all the time, especially when working with entered apprentices and fellow crafts and newly made Masons that have those questions, because his books are built that way to have a discussion.
That's right. Pike was a scholar. Okay, he was brilliant. He literally had to teach himself Sanskrit in order to read the Bhagavad Gita. I mean, that's amazing. And, Morals and Dogma wasn't really meant for the public. And so what happened is he made a book for only with scholars who really want to get deep into the different philosophies that inspired the Scottish Rite degrees. And he would have this conversation with people who did tremendous amount of scholarly work. It's an extremely thick book. It's 832 pages. And I think more non-Masons read that. They try to find negative things about us and quote from him than Masons. And then the Southern jurisdiction decided that would be a thing for them, that whenever you become a 32nd degree Mason, they would give you the whole book. But I'm not sure many people actually read it until recently, like the last 10 years. And, we got into trouble with some of the things he said. And that I don't know if he wasn't intending for it to be given out to everybody or to the public, only to scholars. Or maybe he should have just explained himself a little bit more in a couple of the verses. It would have saved us a lot of heartache during the bad times and stuff. So, but I think he got a lot of things wrong. And I think not that they were wrong back then, but I think we're really evolving. Like, he called Muslims Mohammedans. And some of the things that he got, in the Bhagavad Gita were not accurate. But hey, he had to teach himself Sanskrit to read it. Now there's courses on it, lectures on it. You could download the English version of the Bhagavad Gita on your phone, when literally you had to travel to India to try to find some copy of it and try to learn Sanskrit to read it in the past. So where we come from has been amazing. But when you're reading, Manly P. Hall and Albert Pike, there's a lot of updating of current information that you have to constantly, do. And so, but it is very important, because that's what potential candidates are reading. And that's what a lot of them are coming into Masonry looking for. So, and those are the main things. And so, we may want to look at all the questionnaires and the profiling and the onboarding processes, and they may conclude and say that not many people are interested in esoteric information. Now, I haven't had privy to all the thousands of people that knock on our door in New York State, but I will say that almost every single person I've spoken to in the onboarding process in my district and in my lodge, which is probably about 100, 150 people, I'd say about 97% of them, when you ask them, are you interested in the deeper philosophical aspect of fraternity? Their eyes light up, and you have the look in their eye like they're afraid to ask, but they say yes. They definitely. Because I think what's happening is they're not getting it from anywhere else. And then when you give it to them, then they can relax and enjoy the brotherhood a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I was thinking about, I would say, before the pandemic, working through the North Star program in New York State, as being one of the North Star mentors for brothers, interested gentlemen that were seeking membership to join a lodge. a lot of the questions I would say were the basic frequently asked questions, like what is masonry? What is expected of me? How much does this cost? When can I get started? What's the process? Like real basic transactional stuff. I would say during and now entering the end of the pandemic, a lot of the questions, you can tell the men that are seeking this are thinkers. They've done their homework, and to hear somebody say, well, what did you think about Albert Pike on this? Or have you heard of Manly P. Hall? Or not just asking what's the 32nd degree, but pointed questions about the York or the Scottish Rite, where I'm like, wow, like, you don't even really get those questions from some of our current members, So I would say, yeah, I think we're doing a huge disservice overall if we don't include some of the resources, at least for them to find it. One of the things I would say in New York State is that we have the Robert R. Livingston Library, which is fantastic as a resource, and getting your hands on some of the hard to find Masonic books that I would find out later on were literally hundreds of dollars if you could even buy them, because they don't print them that much anymore, but they're available for Master Masons in New York State. To that point, I wanted to talk to you about your book collection, because I know we've both, read some of the same Masonic texts, but one of the things I love about you, Michael, is that, you've also started seeking light from other sources and bringing some of that real enlightenment and enrichment into your education and into your talks throughout brothers all across the state. What are some sources that you have found crossovers or connections with Freemasonry and other styles of either tradition or worship or spiritualism?
My library is not very, I guess, representative of what you would think from the way I talk and what I talk about almost all the time. Most of the stuff that I get from where I've gotten my life from, which if you want to call it life, I want to say is from articles, from YouTube videos of people, of other scholars communicating it, lectures, and the base material, going to the ritual, reading what the ritual actually says, and then, pertaining to the Scottish Rite, very hard to decipher. So I wound up getting the Franken manuscript, which was the real beginning of the Scottish Rite. It was 25 degrees. Franken manuscript 24 to 25, and I got the Southern jurisdictions, the ritual monitor, and a book called The Bridge to Light when I was doing the Master Craftsman course in the Southern jurisdiction. And it's very intense. And when I started to notice that I was able to decipher, whenever we were doing a degree up in the Northern Southern jurisdiction, I would look for the corresponding degree in the Southern jurisdiction and start digging away and trying to piece together and looking at the commentaries, looking at the symbols. And, the more I searched and found in the York Rite and the Scottish Rite, the deeper I realized how the symbolic degrees really, really truly are. And that's how I started to make these connections. I would say they're connections. So my thinking is this: when we're going through the degrees, we don't really absorb that much. And it's my opinion that at the second part of the degree, when you're hearing the lectures, that your mind is in sensory overload. Some people may say we're like a deer in headlights when we're the candidates. And so I think that we're in a hypnotic state of receiving, so that all of a sudden, either when you're practicing for the degrees, or you're reading a book or an article or hearing a lecture or having a discussion, and someone says something, you may not remember that you remember that part of the degree. All of a sudden, a light will go on. Your brain lights up, neural pathways in your brain, and all of a sudden, you have these small epiphanies, sometimes big epiphanies. You get it. And you really can't really put it in words. That's why I probably want to call it light. Comes to the front of the head, light. And when you try to put it in words, each time we do, we lose it.
How many years have you been a Master Mason?
11 years now.
11 years. And can you remember the first Masonic book or text that you sought out and read?
Wilmhurst, The Meaning of Masonry.
Gotcha. And what were you seeking a specific answer by reading that book, or I just finally have a Masonic book, I want to read this?
I went to the Royal Arch, and they were having it was like the last time they did the festival where they did all 4 degrees in the Royal Arch in one day, which was 9 years ago. Last year, actually 10 years ago, last year, they did all 4 degrees in camp pouches. And now, this was the time they did it before that, which was 9 years before that. So 10 years ago. And then I was really moved by the Holy Royal Arch degree. Then when I went through the Scottish Rite, that's sort of 14th degree, I was blown away. And Steve Stephanakis at the time was a 33rd degree, and he was the deputy's rep. He gave a talk at the end that blew my mind. And then downstairs, I met Javier Ramirez, who told me, you got to read this book. And that was the beginning of me seeing how deep and how profound and how practical. I want to say I'm always afraid and leery to use the term esoteric. It turns a lot of the brothers off that are not into it. I'd rather use spiritual or philosophical, but extremely practical.
I agree with you, the esoteric term, and that was a question that, again, we're talking about the reading room. We're getting ready to reopen the doors on Thursday, September 29th. If you're interested in joining us by the time you hear this podcast and you have signed up at craftsmanonline.com to get our emails, you should have a message from us in our inbox. If not, go to craftsmanonline.com, sign up for our emails, and chances are you'll get that second invitation. I was in a similar position too. I was specifically looking for answers and was really lucky when I came across my first Masonic text. The senior deacon of my mother lodge at the time lent me his copy of Foreign Countries. And he thought it was very important for newly raised Master Masons to have that book to understand it, because we hear that term foreign countries all the time. And to your point on esoteric, I think that sometimes when people hear the term esoteric, they believe that we're going to travel up to space and, look down on, the earth from the heavens, or hop into a time machine and travel back to Egypt with the pyramids and, gain some ancient secret wisdom that may or may not have been there at that time. But really, esoteric, in my opinion, is being able to take some of our Masonic terms and words and lessons that come in the ritual and shift the angle so that you can see the deeper meaning that exists there. So to me, when I hear foreign countries, it's not, yes, as a Master Mason or as an American, I guess I could get up and travel most places where Americans and Masons are welcomed. But to me, when I visit a lodge that is not my mother or home lodge, that's actually visiting a foreign country and observing the traditions and the legacy and the ritual that lodge practices and how they do things. And that was an esoteric thought for me that opened it up. But unfortunately, I agree with you, and it's kind of sad that either hearing the term esoteric or when a brother starts getting into some of the deeper meanings, it does kind of cause others to shy away.
White Marshal Bill Edwards wants us to come up with a definition of esoteric. And I have no doubt, I have full confidence in him that he's the better man to help us draw together and come up with a good definition for our working purposes for esoteric. Because mine, believe it or not, is very dull. I see the word esoteric as specifically meaning, in the grand lodge terms of our rituals, anything that's in cipher. Anything that's not esoteric is something that you can talk about. You can say, this is what we say to the public. Anything that's not, it's esoteric work. And if you look at the etymology of the word esoteric, it just means special knowledge for only the elite. So esoteric in our context means anything that we're not allowed to communicate with unless you're initiated, unless you're a member of the fraternity, first, second degree. Now, that's not the way we use it. We use it in means of deeper stuff, uncovering really, really deep stuff, the finances. And I think that what happens is sometimes we abuse words and terminologies. And then I think what happens is there's some of us that are esoteric Masons who maybe kind of get addicted to esoteric information and books and go from one to the other, to the other, to the other, and then wind up missing the whole point. And it's just about intellectual and data and knowledge, and we stay on that plane. When the plane is not where we want to be, we want to find the inner circle, the point within, our heart, really truly what the purpose of life is all about. How does a person find happiness? How does a man become the best man he could possibly be? And how do we change the world one man at a time? Now, these are the deeper questions that I feel that we should try to figure out how to include in the word esoteric or use another form of the word.
I've also sought out books that have absolutely nothing to do with Freemasonry, just because I read something in our ritual or sat in during a degree and a little light went off in my head and I was like, wow, that terminology or that expression is rooted in something deeper. And you and I have talked about this before, where I would have never picked up a book on Buddhism ever in a previous life before I became a Freemason. But after reading the obligation that's in our second degree and really starting to understand the duty that we have to ourselves and other brother Masons and some of the concepts that come with that, I decided to pick up the book, The Art of Happiness, from the Dalai Lama, and really wanted to get an understanding of this whole seek to understand concept that exists in Buddhism. And I always turn to you and ask these questions because I know you also are influenced by outside thinkers that aren't particularly Freemasons or have anything to do with Freemasonry.
Yeah, I came from a long 22 years before this of studying pretty intensely Hinduism and Buddhism and Christian mysticism, but not the Christian mysticism of like the Rosicrucian type of Christian mysticism, but the Christian mysticism in, let's say, Catholicism or the Russian and Greek Orthodox. They would say that, the deeper books. Yeah. It's also very interesting that you mentioned the Dalai Lama too, because I feel like his response to a question is so Masonic. Someone asked him, what is the greatest religion? And the person regretted it when he asked him, because he asked it in front of a group of public. And he was a Christian fundamentalist. And he realized that he did the wrong thing by asking him that. Put him in a situation where if he would have said Christianity, he would have really insulted his own people. But if he said Buddhism, he would have insulted his guests, right? So the Dalai Lama's response is the religion that brings you closer to God, the religion that makes you more compassionate, the religion that makes you a better person to help heal this world. That is the best religion for you.
And I'm hoping, as we get ready to reopen the doors to the reading room, in this first, I want to talk a little bit about our first program that's coming up. We're going to dive into one of the most public, unfortunately, one of the most public rituals that we perform as Masons. Outside of the installation of newly elected officers, Masonic funeral services are really a chance where a lot of loved ones and family members of our brothers maybe get their first exposure to Freemasonry. What can we expect as we get ready to talk about our program coming up on Thursday, September 29th?
I think it's going to be very exciting. I hope it doesn't turn into a Jerry Springer Masons Gone Wild. I'm joking. Because there was some questions from some of the panelists saying, hey, there's nothing esoteric about the immortality of the soul. My response is, get any more esoteric than that? That is the apex. And so I guess it's going to be very interesting and very exciting.
The panelists that we have lined up is the virtual Right Worshipful's Who's Who in New York Masonry. Everything from one of our Grand Chaplains, and I think you could just say he's Grand Chaplain because he's like Grand Chaplain of every Grand Body in New York State, to some of the brothers who have just dedicated their lives to the craft and are excellent readers and full of knowledge themselves. And that is such an open question when you think about it. It's the second one that's on the petition for anyone who's interested in joining Freemasonry. We frame it as a yes or no question, but it is so much deeper than that.
It absolutely is. And it should prove to be very exciting. We have brothers on the panel that are the epitome of esoteric Masons. We have ones that are the epitome of not esoteric Masons. We have people that are masters of the ritual itself, understanding it and saying it, remembering it, and the history behind it. And we also have a brother who is not coming as a Freemason, but as a theologian.
What also makes it exciting is the balance that we have with the hosts of the reading room now, where we have you, Brother LaRocco, who's deeply educated in our ritual as a AGL, but also is just got a full background of all kinds of philosophy. I'm going to use your word, from all walks of life. And of course, Right Worshipful Edwards, who, if there's anybody that I know that is a reader, it's him. And we'll be talking with him in a future episode about some of the special things that he does in his lodge that actually focuses on reading groups. For brothers that are looking to attend, if you've not been to a Masonic funeral service, or you don't know the ritual word for word, do you need to know these things? And what will it be like when we come in on that Thursday night?
Well, like any reading room, I think that you should read it. It's a short read. If done correctly at the funeral parlor, it should take no more than 12 minutes. Fine for that purpose. So I really do think that one should read it so they're a little familiar with it. We're not going to go through reading it at night. We're going to go right into the questions and discussions about it. So I think reading it, which would be very quick and easy, I think would be a really good idea.
And I have to say, one of the reasons why we make it invitation only and private is because in the spirit of Freemasonry, especially on the third degree, there's things as Master Masons that we want to be able to have those deeper discussions with. That one, we want to make sure that only those that should be in the room at that time will be there. So again, this is why it is invitation only and first come, first serve when it comes to getting in to our Zoom meeting that evening. What else do you have planned for future reading rooms?
We're right in the middle of evaluating some of the older reading rooms so we don't do duplication of effort. And so we haven't really come up with anything yet, but we do want to stick with deep philosophical, deep esoteric subjects, and we'll do chapters from books, send them out, and hopefully everybody will really, really get a lot out of it.
And I think it's beneficial, as you said, for the brothers to at least be familiar with the reading, try to read as much of it as you can. Don't worry, you're not going to be quizzed or put on the spot at any point. If anything, one of the things that I've enjoyed in attending these is coming in and just sitting there, turning off my microphone. I know a lot of us do Zoom meetings for work, but this is one where you are just listening and you can actually feel yourself getting smarter. And hopefully, if you are bringing in your own light source, you can feel yourself getting brighter with that knowledge when you hear other brothers share ideas that either are completely foreign or something that you would have never been able to really pull on your own. That's what I'm looking forward to on Thursday night, September 29th. What are you looking forward to?
Well, what I love about the funeral service is that it makes connections to some important parts in the degrees. So if you're good at knowing the degree, you'll make these connections. And if you don't know the degrees that well, suppose you knew and you've already seen them once or twice, you've been through them only once or twice yourself, then what the reading room will give you is insight to when you see them done again. And you'll be wowed when you go back to your lodges and see these degrees again. Definitely different, more interesting, much more deeper, much more valuable, much more practical interpretation of it.
Again, the reading room, the doors reopen Thursday night, September 29th. If you have not yet signed up, you can join us by visiting craftsmanonline.com to get in on the email invite. Check your inbox. If you've previously visited a reading room or have signed up to receive our messages, your invitation to join us is waiting there.
One of the best parts of Masonry is when we do this, is when we talk about this stuff. It has I think, gone by the wayside accidentally. And it's what happens when Masons get together and talk about this stuff. It's the real way. You know, we use as a format or a foundation, a lecture or a book. It's really what happens between us. Remember, from Scripture, 2 or 3 gather in my name, there I am.
I knew you were going to drop some of that esotericism. I knew it. I love it. Very worshipful, Michael LaRocco. Thanks again for coming on.
Thank you very much.
This has been our Craftsman Online podcast. A reminder that new episodes are available for download every Monday morning. And if you're in search for more light, you can find that Masonic Education at craftsmanonline.com. Until next time, let peace and harmony prevail.